In other words, the logic, in my view, if you felt that blacks were genetically, inherently inferior, you can give them the very best of conditions, and they would not be able to perform or function. You see, but the need to deprive, at the same time that people are saying, oh, it's cold outside, make sure your dog is in. Make sure your dog gets all the nutrients for growth and development, because you're not fearful that the dog is going to take over the human beings. You see, but once you start depriving, systematic deprivation, it means, well, I must be afraid of these people maybe overtaking me if I allow them the same conditions, opportunities that I set forth for myself.
I will! Sit down! Don't you dare talk to me in front of my kids like that, motherfucker! Watch it. It's right, because they're niggers. That's why, because they're fucking niggers and he's saying, don't do it! Don't do it! Excuse me! Put your hands on me. Put your hands on me. Come on. Don't do it! Don't worry. I'll record you. You motherfucker!
That's
you motherfucker! You motherfucker! That's right. You're a nigger and he's saving. Watch this motherfucker. Fuck you, nigger!
Yo, chill.
Motherfucker!
Chill.
The color-confrontation theory further postulates that whites are vulnerable to their sense of numerical inadequacy. This inadequacy is apparent in their drive to divide the vast majority of non-whites into fractional as well as frictional minorities. This is viewed as a fundamental behavior response of whites to their own minority status. The white race has structured and manipulated their own thought process and conceptual patterns, as well as those of the entire non-white world majority, so that the real numerical minority, whites, illusionally feel and represent itself in the world's majority, while the true numerical majority, non-whites, illusionally feel and view itself as the minority. Interestingly, the white collective, whenever discussing the question of color, never discusses any of its own particular ethnic groups as minorities, but constantly focuses on the various ethnic, language, and religious groups of non-white peoples as minorities. Then great efforts are made to initiate conflict between these arbitrary groups. This is one of the key methods by which a minority can remain in power. The divide, frictionalize, and conquer pattern, observable through history, wherever non-whites are confronted by whites, results primarily from whites' sense of color deficiency and secondarily from their sense of numerical inadequacy. This pattern then is a compensatory adjustment to permit psychological comfort through dominance and control. Similarly, the present-day frantic focus on birth control for the entire non-white world is another example of white people's conscious or unconscious awareness of the numerical deficiency status. There is neither great emphasis on controlling the birth of whites. In fact, there are some white governmental groups that give dividends to citizens for increased procreation. The above are but a few examples selected from millions of large and small behavior patterns practiced by whites in varying quantities. Yet, these examples effectively demonstrate the individual and collective neurotic need to focus on color, sex, genetics, numbers, superiority, inferiority, white supremacy, and power. The color-confrontation theory contends that all of the above can be explained on the basis of the core psychological sense of color deficiency and numerical inadequacy. The individual patterns of behavior that over time evolved into collective, social, institutional, and now systemic patterns are seen as the origin of the system of white supremacy, which operates at a universal level and is the only effective and functional racism existence in the world today. Further, racism, white supremacy, in this historic epoch is viewed as a full-blown social contradiction and a major social dynamic superseding all others as in influencing universal social practices and decisions. The color-confrontation theory recognizes racism as one of the dominating forces determining character development, personality, and formation type. Therefore, a functional definition of racism, white supremacy, is the behavioral syndrome of an individual and collective color inferiority and numerical inadequacy that includes patterns of thought, speech, and action as seen in members of the white organization. What are the practical implications of this theory? Of major importance is the fact that for the first time in centuries, non-white peoples throughout the world will have a rational basis for understanding the motivational nuances of individual and collective white behavior. The color-confrontation thesis theorizes that the majority of the world's people, non-whites, were manipulated into subordinate positions because, never having experienced such a state in terms of their own thought and logic processes and premises, they were unprepared to understand patterns of behavior predicated upon a sense of color deficiency and numerical inadequacy. This is analogous to the man with the two eyes finding it difficult, if not impossible, to understand the behavior patterns of motivation of the congeniality of one-eyed man, who always looked upon a two-eyed state with jealous antagonism and perhaps aggression. Armed with such insight, knowledge, and understanding, non-whites will cease to be vulnerable to the behavioral maneuverings of individuals of collective whites, but non-whites will be less vulnerable to the messages of white superiority and that radiate through the known universe and permeate white world cultures, which are dominated by the white supremacy system. The understanding will have profound effects on the developing egos and self-images of all non-white children who suffer severe damage under the white supremacy culture. Moreover, wherever they are confronted by the ideology of white supremacy, non-whites will understand it is only a compensatory psychological adjustment for a genetic numerical deficiency state. Thus, the white supremacy message can be evaluated and negated more readily. This allows non-whites to gain psychological liberation from the white ideology domination that negatively affects the total functioning of non-whites. Further, non-whites will be less vulnerable for being maneuvered into conflict with one another, thus weakening the continued domination of the white supremacy system. Also, white peoples of the world presumably also could benefit from such an awareness of the motivation behind behaviors that often baffle them. If they are sincere in their attempts to stop the practices of white supremacy racism, whites may be able to find methods to do so once the cause is understood. Perhaps some psychiatrists will develop a method of mass psychotherapy to help whites become comfortable with their color and their numbers. However, one can foresee a major problem arising from the possible difficulty of motivating whites to release the secondary gains historically derived from the racist system. The possibility of white people accepting this analysis of the white problems in human relations is not for me to answer. I do not know that the majority of the world's people are looking for an answer to the dilemma that was once called the American dilemma. They are looking for a change. Perhaps the Cress theory of color confrontation will help them to make that change.
You have to know what's happening in every part of your world. Don't sit here, I'm a black American, I'm living in Newark, New Jersey. Well, New York, I have no problem in Newark, New Jersey. We're okay. We have a nice mayor. No, we've got to become involved. Because whatever they're doing to us in Haiti, whatever they did in Zaire, in Lomé, in Ghana, it's coming to you, brother. It's coming your way if it's not already there. Whatever they do to you, they're coming with us, to us with it. Whatever they do to us, they're coming to you with it.